There are mornings when we wake up and realize that everything around us has changed in ways both silent and profound. The person who once stood by our side is no longer there. Sometimes it creeps in slowly, so quietly that we don't notice until everything is already different. But whether fast or slow, it is inevitable. None of us can hold on to everything forever. And that is the very nature of life, the nature of impermanence. Impermanence is not just some distant philosophical concept. It weaves itself into every moment of our daily lives, as if by squeezing harder we could make them stay. But that very clinging pulls us deeper into fear and loss. The Buddha once said, "All conditioned things are impermanent." You will see people from all over the world who have learned to walk through upheaval, face inevitable change, and find peace amid losses that once seemed unbearable. Some lost everything, but a silent teacher of life. If you are in the middle of an uncertain period, if you've just gone through an event that has turned your world upside down, or if you simply want to learn how to live more lightly through the changes of life, then perhaps what you're about to hear will touch something deep within you. Because impermanence spares no one, and how we learn to live with it will determine whether the rest of our life is lived in peace or in suffering. Impermanence and Lessons on Life's Changes. Part 1. Opening. When everything changes before our eyes. There are moments in life when just a single event can change everything. We often assume that life will flow according to our plans, that what feels familiar today will still be there tomorrow. But then, an unexpected turn can erase every plan, shatter what we thought was solid, and push us onto a path we never imagined. The stories you are about to hear in this section are about those moments, when life suddenly veers in a different direction without warning, forcing people to confront impermanence and find themselves again in the midst of upheaval. 1.1. A morning that would never be the same. That London morning was wrapped in a thin layer of fog, the kind of heavy mist you see in late autumn. Clutching a hot cup of coffee, her mind still adrift in thoughts about a new project she was completing for an important client. Everything felt as normal as ever, and nothing in Emma's mind suggested that her life was about to change completely. She descended into the underground, blending into the busy crowd on the Piccadilly line. The same familiar faces of early commuters, the faint sound of a street musician playing from somewhere down the corridor. The routine announcements about train schedules. It was all part of her usual morning rhythm. Emma unlocked her phone, skimmed through a few emails, and smiled when she saw a text from her boyfriend, James, confirming dinner that evening at their favorite Italian restaurant. Just a short message, but enough to warm up London's gray morning. But as the train left Green Park Station, a strange feeling began to rise in her chest. Her phone buzzed again, this time with several urgent messages from her younger sister in New York. "Emma, call me right now. It's important." A wave of unease swept over her, though she tried to reassure herself. It might just be a small family matter. She called back. Her sister's voice trembled on the other end. "Emma, it's about Mom. She had a stroke this morning. The doctors say she doesn't have much time." The noise of the train station seemed to vanish, replaced by a hollow silence. Emma could only hear her own heartbeat, each breath heavy and strained. Her mother had always been healthy, still video calling Emma every Sunday evening to talk about the little garden behind her house and the roses she tended all summer. This could not be happening, not now. The train sped forward, but for Emma, time had stopped. She couldn't recall how she got off at the next stop, hailed a taxi, or booked a flight to New York. Everything happened on autopilot, her body moving while her mind floated in a void. Just hours ago, her life had revolved around work deadlines, design drafts, and weekend plans. Now, none of it mattered. There was only one reality. Her mother was on the edge between life and death. Emma flew to New York that night. When she walked into the stark, white hospital room at Mount Sinai, she understood that all plans, all certainties, everything she thought was unshakable, could collapse in a single day. The next days blurred into a cycle of hospital corridors, medications, and tearful conversations with doctors. Her mother passed away 4 days later, leaving behind a space Emma didn't know how to fill. Yet from that grief, something inside her began to shift. She started to see everything differently. Her work, her relationships, even time itself. Every moment with the people she loved became so precious that she no longer wanted to miss a single chance to cherish them. Emma realized that for years she had lived as though she had unlimited time. She postponed trips, skipped calls, and promised to meet loved ones another time. But another time sometimes never comes. Life is an unceasing flow, and we are all moving within it, whether we notice or not. Her story is not only about loss. It's also a reminder that impermanence spares no one, and nothing guarantees that tomorrow will be like today. We cannot control when change strikes, and courageously embracing change as an inevitable part of life. And that is why we begin this section with her story, to see that sometimes, just one day, one message, one moment, is enough to turn an entire life in a different direction, forcing us to face the truth that nothing lasts forever. But if we look closer, we will see that within impermanence lies the chance to grow, to love, and to live a life that truly matters. 1.2. The concept of impermanence in life, from everyday reality to Buddhist philosophy. Impermanence, a word that might sound abstract at first, but the truth is that each of us has felt it, sometimes in the smallest moments, sometimes in the events that shake our entire world. It can be the coffee shop you used to visit every weekend suddenly closing its doors forever, the street where you once walked to school, now lined with new buildings, with no trace of the trees that once shaded your path, or the friend you thought would always be there, who has now moved halfway across the globe. And the familiar rhythm of your conversations slowly fades into silence. From the perspective of ordinary life, impermanence is often experienced as loss, change, or the breaking of something familiar. People tend to resist it, to cling to what they know, because familiarity feels safe. When the patterns we are used to are disrupted, we often feel disoriented. Does not see impermanence as merely a source of suffering. Instead, it recognizes it as the natural law of existence, a law that applies to all things, without exception. The Buddha taught that everything is in a state of constant flux, our bodies, our emotions, our relationships, and even our thoughts. Nothing, no matter how strong or beautiful, can remain exactly as it is forever. This is not a curse, but a reality. And in that reality lies the seed of liberation. From the Buddhist perspective, a situation that seems hopeless can shift in an unexpected way. In everyday life, however, this perspective is not easy to embody. We often mistake impermanence for instability, and instability for danger. This is why many people live with a constant sense of urgency, trying to secure their happiness by holding on to what they have. Yet this effort is like trying to grasp water with your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it slips away. The truth is, impermanence does not ask for our approval. It simply unfolds. The seasons change whether we are ready or not. Children grow up whether or not we want to keep them little. Our own bodies age whether or not we accept it. The more we resist, the more suffering we create for ourselves. But when we learn to see impermanence clearly, we can begin to flow with it, instead of fighting against it. Consider a musician playing a beautiful melody. They do not try to make a single note last forever, because they know that the beauty lies in the movement from one note to the next. Life is much the same, and the sky itself remains vast and unchanged. Contemplating death, a practice often misunderstood, reminds us of the preciousness of the present and of the need to live with intention. Impermanence also teaches humility. No matter how powerful we are, we cannot stop time. No matter how wise we think we have become, life will always surprise us. And yet, this humility is freeing. We do not have to control everything to live fully. We do not have to predict the future to prepare our hearts for it. We can walk through life knowing that change will come, and that this, too, is part of the beauty of being alive. Ultimately, impermanence is not an enemy to be conquered, but a teacher to be embraced. It strips away illusions and brings us face to face with reality. And when we stop trying to make life permanent, we can begin to experience its fleeting moments with a clarity and gratitude that we never knew before. In this way, impermanence is not only a truth to accept, it is a gift to cherish. 1.3. Why people fear change, the psychology and the instinct to cling. It's easy to say, I accept change. A sudden shift in environment, such as weather changes, loss of shelter, or a change in food sources, could be life-threatening. Over thousands of years, our species developed a bias toward stability. Predictability meant survival, while uncertainty required heightened vigilance. That ancient instinct still lives in us today, even though most modern changes, like a new boss at work or a shift in technology, don't threaten our physical survival. But there's a subtler, more personal layer, our ego's attachment to identity. We often define ourselves by the roles we play, the relationships we hold, the places we live, and the possessions we own. Change threatens to strip these away, and with them, the version of me we've carefully built. When someone says, "I don't know who I am anymore," after a major life change, it's not poetic exaggeration. It's a genuine psychological disorientation. The mind clings because letting go feels like losing the self. Buddhist philosophy offers a gentle but radical insight here. The self we protect so fiercely is, in fact, not fixed. The Buddha taught that clinging to impermanent things, be it youth, wealth, relationships, or even our own identity, is the root of suffering. We suffer not because change happens, but because we demand that it doesn't. In this view, fear of change is actually fear of confronting impermanence itself. Consider the story of Liam, an Irish engineer living in Canada. For 10 years, his life was defined by his high-paying job, his downtown apartment, and his close-knit group of friends. When his company downsized, Liam lost his job and soon after, his apartment. The sudden emptiness in his calendar and his home felt unbearable, not just because of financial insecurity, but because he didn't know who he was without his career and lifestyle. Months later, through a meditation retreat, Liam realized he had been holding onto a fixed idea of himself, the successful expatriate. When that image dissolved, he thought his life had collapsed. But in reality, what collapsed was just an identity that was never permanent to begin with. Understanding the roots of our resistance to change, neurological, evolutionary, and ego-driven, doesn't make the fear vanish instantly, but it allows us to meet it with compassion rather than judgment. Instead of seeing ourselves as weak for struggling, it can be the very thing that frees us. Part 2. Impermanence in Buddhist Scriptures. On the journey to explore the profound laws of life, impermanence is not merely an abstract philosophical concept, but a mirror reflecting every fleeting moment. In this section, dew still clung to the leaves, and the sunlight had only just brushed the stone steps. The Buddha sat quietly beneath an ancient sala tree, his gaze stretching far away, yet also seeming to penetrate each tiny speck of dust drifting through the sunbeam. The young monks gathered around, waiting for his words. Among them, Ananda spoke up. "Blessed One, I have heard you speak about impermanence. Yet my heart still trembles whenever I think about change, especially when it means losing what I hold dear." The Buddha smiled gently, not answering immediately. He bent down and picked up a petal that had just fallen from the sala tree. "Ananda, look closely. This petal was on the branch just moments ago, radiant and beautiful. Now, it rests in my hand. Its color remains, its fragrance lingers, but can you say it is the same as when it was still on the branch?" Ananda shook his head. The Buddha continued, "The fall of this petal was inevitable, and so too is the passing of all things in life. Impermanence did not arrive just today. It has been here since the moment the petal was formed." He explained that impermanence is not only about aging, sickness, and death. It is the subtle moment-to-moment arising and passing in all phenomena. The river appears unchanged, yet its waters never stop flowing. A person may seem to be the same as yesterday, yet every cell, every thought, every breath has already transformed. Once, as if bowing to a great truth. "Monks, this place is not merely where a life ends. It is a lesson for the living. All that is formed will decay." Knowing this, took a deep breath and smiled. She understood that, like the sala petal in the Buddha's hand long ago, everything has already begun to fall from the moment it blooms. Impermanence, through the Buddha's eyes, is not a tragedy. It is a reminder that all joy, all opportunities, and even all sorrows will change. And because we know they will not last forever, we can love fully, let go when the time comes, and live wholly in each brief and precious moment. 2.2. The three marks of existence. When the universe writes truth in impermanence, suffering, and non-self. On the ancient streets of Rajgir, where caravans from distant lands would pause for rest, People still tell of a remarkable evening when the Buddha spoke to both merchants and common folk about the three marks of existence, the three truths engraved upon all that exists: impermanence, suffering, and non-self. That day, the golden sunset spilled across terracotta rooftops, and flocks of white birds returned to their nests. The Buddha sat upon a large rock, surrounded by faces from many corners of the world: a sailor from Alexandria, a Persian scholar, Indian farmers, and merchants from the Far East. The air was both solemn and warm, as though all boundaries of language and culture had melted away under his serene gaze. He began with impermanence, the truth that nothing lasts forever. Holding up a clay pot offered by a local villager, he said, "This pot, from the moment it was shaped by the potter's hands, already carried within it the seed of its breaking. No matter how carefully it is kept, one day it will return to dust." The crowd fell silent. They understood he was not merely speaking of a vessel, but of the body, of relationships, of power, of everything we cling to. Then he spoke of suffering, not as a pessimistic lament, but as an undeniable fact of life. He told the story of a wealthy merchant from Babylon who once came to him weary and restless. The man had everything: granaries full, caravans laden with goods stretching into the horizon. Yet he lived in constant fear of loss, in the tension of guarding what he owned. The Buddha said, "Suffering is not only in physical pain or tragedy. Suffering is when the mind is bound, when we cling to what cannot be kept for long." The listeners saw clearly that even the richest, most powerful people cannot escape the shadow of suffering. Finally, what you call I is the same, a collection of body, feelings, thoughts, memories, all changing, with nothing fixed to call an eternal self. To illustrate, thinkers such as Friedrich Nietzsche and existentialists like Jean-Paul Sartre and Martin Heidegger placed change at the center of human existence. Nietzsche spoke of eternal recurrence. We see that Western religious traditions often link change to a higher power or cosmic plan, while Western philosophical traditions explore it through reason, ethics, and human agency. Buddhism. While Buddhism invites us to see change as an ever-flowing river, to live in harmony with its current rather than against it. This intersection of perspectives enriches our understanding. Each story is not merely about loss, but about transformation, the quiet miracle that impermanence can bring. 3.1. Story 1. How to pull weeds without damaging the roots. Slowly, the rhythm of nature became his teacher. He started seeing his own life in the cycles of the seasons: growth, decay, renewal. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low over the canals, Edward realized he no longer longed for his old life. The constant chase for status and wealth felt like a dream that had run its course. He began offering free business mentoring to young entrepreneurs, not from a place of ambition, but from a desire to share what he had learned. That success meant little without peace of mind. Even the life you think you control will one day slip away. And that's the gift, because when you stop clinging, you finally see who you truly are. The story of Edward Klein is not one of tragedy, but of transformation. Impermanence took from him the life he thought he wanted, only to return to him a deeper, freer self, one he had never known existed. In the quiet acceptance of change, madly in love with the man who had been by her side for 4 years, Adrian, a journalist who once promised to walk with her to the end of the road. But then, on a rainy afternoon, Nepal, 2017. It was from a trip she had taken before meeting Adrian, a journey she had always dreamed of repeating but never had the chance. In those images, Isabel saw herself smiling under snow-capped peaks, wandering through vibrant market stalls, and watching the sun set over the Pokhara Valley. A thought came suddenly. Perhaps she needed to leave. Not to run away, but to reclaim a part of herself that had been sleeping. 2 weeks later, Isabel arrived in Kathmandu. The city was loud, chaotic, and full of unfamiliar scents. These time-honored skills seemed to have lost their reliability. The sea was changing faster than memory could keep up. That year, the cod fishing season, the most important of the year, arrived almost a month late. The warmer sea pushed the fish farther north earlier than expected. Many fishermen lost everything, having prepared their boats and nets according to the old schedule. At first, Eric was also shaken, but he recalled something his grandfather had once said: the sea never lies. And if we wanted to survive, we had to learn to understand and respond in that language. One March morning, Eric took his 17-year-old son, Lars, out to sea. The boy, more familiar with the glow of a phone screen than the winter sun, was in for a moment he would never forget. While anchoring near a small fjord, they saw a humpback whale rise, blowing a plume of mist into the golden dawn. Eric told him, "We're just like it. We move, adapt, and find our way. Those who refuse to change will sink." In the years that followed, Eric became a voice of adaptation for the community. He organized gatherings where fishermen would drink hot coffee, look over the latest current maps, and learn to combine tradition with science. Slowly, the entire town began to shift, no longer clinging to the old calendar as if it were scripture, but becoming more flexible in navigating an ever-changing sea. Then one evening, as emerald and violet auroras swept across the Tromsø sky, Eric sat by his front porch, watching the lights swirl. He thought to himself, the Mongol Empire of the 13th century emerged from the steppes under the leadership of Genghis Khan. In less than a lifetime, it became the largest contiguous land empire in history, stretching from the Pacific to Eastern Europe. Yet, its vastness became its greatest weakness. After the death of Genghis Khan, the empire fragmented, its territories absorbed by emerging powers, its culture blending into the lands it once conquered. The lesson from these stories is not one of cynicism, but of clarity. Just as a flower blooms at the height of spring only to wilt in autumn, human achievements, no matter how grand, are subject to the same law of change. Empires fall not always because of weakness, but because impermanence is woven into the very fabric of existence. In Buddhism, this truth is a call to humility. If even the mightiest thrones crumble and the most fortified walls eventually fall, how can we cling to power, wealth, when cultural values transform over time? In a square in Florence, surrounded by ancient stone walls and the towering silhouettes of churches, Sophia, a young Italian anthropology student, would often sit for hours, watching the flow of people passing by. She loved to observe couples holding hands, groups of young friends in t-shirts printed with American rock bands, and elderly men and women still wearing old berets and hand-knitted sweaters. For Sophia, this square felt like a gateway to two worlds, one rooted in tradition and one alive with modernity, coexisting, yet constantly shifting. Cultural values once regarded as the standard of an era often change, morphing with the tides of history. In medieval Europe, beauty was tied to fair, smooth skin, hair kept covered, and floor-length garments, symbols of modesty and social standing. But during the Renaissance, fuller bodies and rosy skin became signs of prosperity and allure. Then, in the 20th century, as industrialization surged and Hollywood spread across the globe, the ideal shifted to a slim and energetic physique. The transformation extends beyond aesthetics to the concept of family. In the 19th century, in many parts of America and Europe, having a large family was a source of pride, a kind of insurance for old age. But by the 21st century, with advances in healthcare, education, and the economy, many couples chose to have fewer children or none at all, prioritizing careers and personal experiences instead. One fascinating truth remains: not all values disappear. Many simply adapt to survive in a new age. The communal spirit of rural European villages, once seen in neighbors helping each other harvest crops, can now be found in online crowdfunding campaigns to help strangers overcome illness. All conditioned things change: beliefs, norms, ideals, arising, existing for a time, and then dissolving or transforming. This doesn't mean we should reject or mourn the past, but rather, we should observe and accept change with mindfulness. As a Thai monk once told Sophia during her visit to Wat Pho, people cling to values as if they are eternal, but it is change that is their true nature. When you release the idea of forever, you begin to cherish the present more deeply. Years later, Sophia left Florence for New York to continue her research. She realized that, whether in Europe or America, in bustling cities or quiet countryside, culture is like a river, sometimes calm, sometimes turbulent, but never still. And in that change, even as old things fade, humanity finds opportunities to learn, adapt, and grow. Because ultimately, what matters is not preserving old values like immovable monuments, but keeping their spirit alive, even as their outward forms change. Like the lotus, whether it blooms in a muddy pond or in a glass tank in the city, it still radiates its pure fragrance. In the same way, true values will always find a way to live on through every era. 4.3. When the world trembles, and humanity's instinct to survive. At a small cafe in Berlin, on a winter morning, Marcus, a freelance journalist from Germany, sat in front of his laptop, sipping black coffee while reading news about global upheavals. On the screen were all kinds of headlines: climate crises, pandemics, political conflicts, economic recessions. Outside, the Black Death in 14th century Europe, the Great Depression of 1929, the two world wars, or the oil crisis of the 1970s. All were giant waves shaking every familiar way of life. But what makes the 21st century unique is the speed at which these upheavals spread. Just one piece of news from a small corner of the world can, through the internet, influence the behavior and emotions of millions on another continent within hours. When the COVID-19 pandemic broke out, the image of once bustling cities suddenly frozen into silence became the symbol of a world turned upside down. In Italy, the family of Sofia, a music teacher in Florence, had to learn how to teach and study through a computer screen. The street concerts that once breathed life into the city paused indefinitely. But instead of letting the music fade away, she and her friends organized online performances that drew thousands of viewers from around the globe. Upheavals also deeply reshaped economies. In the United States, major retail chains were forced to close en masse, but at the same time, millions of people discovered new opportunities in online business. In Africa, where internet access had once been limited, the pressure of crisis spurred technological initiatives, from online education to digital payments, opening the door to a new stage of development. Of course, adaptation is not always easy. In Syria, Farid's family endured years of living through war. They were forced to leave their homeland and migrate to Germany. In the first months, Farid felt lost. Language barriers and cultural differences wore him down. But over time, he learned the language, joined vocational classes, and eventually became a beloved chef at a Middle Eastern restaurant in Berlin. Or economic crisis, reflect the principle of impermanence. No circumstance lasts forever, whether it's a golden age or a period of hardship. Humans too can change direction while continuing forward. Once we understand this, upheaval is no longer the enemy, but becomes a living lesson in human flexibility and resilience. And perhaps, it is precisely in the moments that seem most chaotic that we see most clearly the hidden strength within us, the strength that enables humanity not just to survive, but to rise and rebuild the world after every time it shakes. Part 5. A scientific perspective on change. In the realm of science, impermanence is not a philosophical concept, but a measurable truth. Physics tells us that atoms never stay still, constantly vibrating, colliding, and transforming. Biology shows us that life is a continuous cycle of birth, growth, decay, and renewal. When viewed through this lens, change is not the exception. It is the only constant, shaping the very fabric of existence. 5.1. The laws of physics and biology. Nothing stays still. In the heart of Cambridge, England, Dr. Amelia Thornton, a renowned theoretical physicist, often sat by her office window overlooking the River Cam. She had spent decades studying quantum fluctuations, the restless dance of subatomic particles, and yet she was still struck by the irony, the closer she looked. When she first looked through a microscope and saw pond water teeming with microorganisms, they moved, multiplied. No matter how stable something appears, it is always changing beneath the surface. Across the Atlantic, in a small coastal town in Maine, marine biologist Dr. Evan Clark was documenting coral reefs. Over decades, he watched them bloom in vibrant colors, only to fade and bleach as ocean temperatures rose. The coral's struggle mirrored a truth he knew all too well. Adaptation is the only path to survival. Nature does not stop, he once told a group of students. If you stay the same, you fall behind. Physics, too, reinforces this lesson. From Newton's laws describing constant motion to Einstein's insights into the fluid nature of time and space, science dismantles the idea of permanence. Even mountains, which seem eternal, are slowly eroding, and stars, brilliant and immense, are burning toward inevitable collapse. Amelia often brought this perspective into her lectures. She would draw a circle on the board, representing a single hydrogen atom, and then explain how its electrons never stop moving. If the smallest building blocks of reality cannot stay still, she would say with a knowing smile, why do we expect life to? Evan, on the other hand, preferred to teach through storytelling. He spoke of jellyfish that survived mass extinctions by altering their life cycles, of whales changing migration patterns as oceans warmed, of plants that flowered earlier or later in response to shifting seasons. Each example underscored the same point. Adaptability is not just a strategy, it is the essence of life. Yet, understanding impermanence on a scientific level is not the same as accepting it emotionally. Amelia learned this when her mentor, Professor Harold Finch, passed away. His absence was a stark reminder that even the brightest minds are bound by the same universal law of change. In the lab, particles shifted without pause. In life, relationships, too, evolved, ended, focusing on regeneration rather than preservation of what once was. Together, Amelia's and Evan's stories reveal a profound harmony between science and life philosophy. The constant flux in the natural world is not a cause for despair, but an invitation to grow, to adapt, to become. If every particle in the universe is in motion, then perhaps our own changes are simply part of a much greater rhythm. In physics, in biology, and in the quiet moments of human life, the truth remains the same. Nothing stays still. And maybe, just maybe, that's what keeps the universe alive. 5.2. The Hidden Power of the Mind. Rising from the Rubble. On a misty autumn morning in Edinburgh, Scotland, clinical psychologist Charlotte MacLeod sat across from a new patient, a middle-aged man named Daniel, who had just lost his wife in a tragic car accident. His eyes were tired, but a skill that can be cultivated, much like muscles grow stronger through training. In New York, another story is often told in the therapeutic community. Maria Gonzalez, a young Mexican-American entrepreneur, lost her entire company during the financial crisis. Within months, everything she had built was gone. At first, Maria fell into depression, struggling with insomnia night after night. But instead of letting herself spiral downward, she began walking every morning, practicing meditation, and keeping a gratitude journal. 6 months later, stories like Daniel's and Maria's vividly illustrate an important psychological principle. Humans can adapt to harsher realities than they ever imagined. Studies from Harvard and Stanford universities show that when faced with crises, the brain activates regions related to problem-solving and emotional regulation. When properly nurtured, this activation becomes the foundation for lasting strength. Charlotte often compares resilience to a bamboo stalk. In a storm, a rigid tree may break, but bamboo bends with the wind and springs back when the storm passes. The human mind works the same way. When too rigid, it can shatter, but when flexible and open to change, it recovers more quickly. A crucial aspect of resilience is the ability to redefine the meaning of a painful event. During therapy, Daniel gradually shifted from asking, "Why did this happen to me?" to "What can I do to honor my wife's life through my actions?" By participating in road safety volunteer work, he found a new sense of purpose, a kind of medicine for the soul. When Maria looked back at her bankruptcy, she realized it had freed her from an exhausting lifestyle and a toxic partnership. "I lost my money, but I found myself again," she shared in a TEDx talk. Interestingly, resilience does not mean never feeling pain. On the contrary, those with high mental elasticity often allow themselves to fully experience emotions, sadness, anger, fear, before gradually moving into action. They do not deny their feelings, but neither do they let those feelings drown them. Psychologists at the University of Pennsylvania have also found that factors that strengthen resilience include a strong social support network, the ability to reframe problems positively, and self-care habits such as exercise, adequate sleep, and meditation. These seemingly small habits act like a shock absorber for the mind. Charlotte will never forget another patient, Elena, a refugee from Syria. She had lost her family to war, crossed the sea in dangerous conditions, and had to start over in a foreign land. Instead of letting her painful memories destroy her, Elena learned English, joined a community sewing class, and after a few years, opened her own small clothing shop. "I don't forget what I've lost," Elena said, "but I choose to let the past make me stronger, not weaker." These stories show that resilience is not some distant ideal. It is a potential within everyone. It awakens when we face challenges and choose to respond actively rather than surrender. The psychology of resilience delivers a clear message: the world will keep changing, and at times it will knock us down, but the power to rise again lies in our own hands. When we learn to train and nurture it, we don't just survive, we grow stronger, wiser, and able to inspire others. As Charlotte often tells her students, the greatest strength of a human being is not in never falling, but in knowing how to stand up, stronger than before. 5.3. Modern science unveils the secrets of happiness and flexible thinking. On a winter afternoon in Zurich, Switzerland, psychologist Dr. Laura Vogel sat by the window of a small cafe by the lake, her eyes following snowflakes as they drifted gently onto the still surface of the water. In front of her were the latest data sheets from a 15-year study on the relationship between happiness and cognitive flexibility. The results not only confirmed what she had long believed, but also opened a completely new approach to helping people live more fully in an ever-changing world. In this study, more than 3,000 participants from various countries took part. The scientists didn't just measure happiness levels through surveys. They also used functional MRI scans to observe brain activity when participants faced unexpected situations or sudden changes. They found that people who could adjust their perspectives and approaches with ease reported significantly higher happiness levels compared to the others. Cognitive flexibility is not simply intelligence or creativity. It's the ability to change one's mental framework when circumstances demand it, like a small boat that can quickly shift its course in rough seas rather than charging headlong into a storm. Laura often compares it to a living symphony in the mind, where the notes and rhythms can adapt to the flow of life. One standout case in Laura's research is the story of Oliver Becker, a German architect. When the COVID-19 pandemic struck, the company he worked for was forced to shut down major projects, with bankruptcy looming. Instead of clinging to the old model, Oliver leveraged his design skills to create home office spaces and multifunctional interiors for small apartments, a need that was surging at the time. 6 months later, his new venture not only saved him from financial crisis, but also rekindled his lost creative spark. Oliver reflected, reported feeling lighter and more confident afterward. Notably, neuroscientist Ayaka Mori went further by studying the effects of cognitive flexibility combined with mindfulness meditation. The results showed that those who trained both adaptability and mindfulness not only reported higher happiness, but also maintained calm under pressure 40% better than the control group. Ayaka observed, when the mind is as steady as a mountain and as soft as water, one can walk through storms without losing oneself. Another example is Sofia Martinez, a Spanish lecturer living in California. After being rejected from a key job opportunity, instead of sinking into disappointment, she decided to use the time to study artificial intelligence, a field she had never considered before. Just 1 year later, Sophia became a pioneer in integrating AI into art education. Cognitive flexibility allows us to turn hardships into opportunities, failures into stepping stones, and, most importantly, keep our hearts open to new possibilities. You'll see that happiness isn't a destination, it's a state you carry with you along the journey. Part 6. A Buddhist perspective on change. Change is something no one can avoid, but a natural law, impermanence, that teaches us how to let go and live fully in every moment. The stories below will take us across lands and through encounters with different people. Had passed away from a sudden illness in only a few short months. Everything had collapsed so quickly, leaving behind an emptiness nothing could fill. Sophia had not come to Japan for sightseeing, but to seek an answer to a question that had haunted her. Why do the most precious things in life disappear so quickly? During her days in Kyoto, she happened to meet Zen master Hiroshi, an elderly monk with a small frame but eyes so deep they seemed to hold all the autumns that had ever passed. Hiroshi was not a man of many words. On the first day, he simply handed her a cup of hot tea and said, "Watch the falling leaves. They fall not out of resentment, not out of fear, but simply because their time has come." The words seemed simple, yet in the days that followed, Sophia began to watch the garden more closely. Each morning, a few more leaves would drift from the branches without regret. Each afternoon, the wind would blow through, leaving open spaces for sunlight to stream in. The Zen master taught her that in Buddhist teachings, impermanence and nikka is the nature of all things. Nothing lasts forever, and precisely because of that, everything becomes more precious in the present moment. Hiroshi told Sophia the story of an old samurai who once came to the temple seeking the way. The samurai feared death so much that he lived every day in anxiety. The Zen master simply led him into the garden and pointed to the cherry blossoms in full bloom. "Do you see their beauty? Tomorrow they may fall. So will you spend today admiring them, or worrying they won't be here?" That single question changed the way the samurai saw the world. Sophia began to realize that her suffering did not come only from loss, but from her resistance to the truth that all things change. She had always wanted to keep Daniel by her side, like trying to keep a leaf forever green. But in that garden, watching the leaves fall, she understood that love does not vanish. It only changes form, like fallen leaves becoming nourishment for the soil. In the West, many modern psychologists have also studied the impact of contemplating impermanence on mental health. A Stanford University study found that people who regularly practice mindfulness of impermanence show significantly lower levels of anxiety and depression. For when we clearly understand that all emotions, both sorrow and joy, are merely passing waves, we are no longer completely swept away by them. Sophia stayed in Kyoto for another month, sweeping leaves in the garden each morning. She began to feel a quiet lightness when she saw a leaf let go of its branch, an acceptance no longer tinged with tragedy. On her final day, before she left, Zen Master Hiroshi told her, "We cannot keep a flower in bloom forever, but we can cherish it while it blossoms. When you understand that, you will find your heart more free." On the flight back to Stockholm, Sophia opened the photos she had taken: crimson treetops, water surfaces reflecting the sky, and serene moments in the midst of change. She knew she would still miss Daniel, but it was no longer a bleeding wound. It had become part of the painting of her life, blending with all its other colors. Contemplating impermanence does not erase loss or pain, but it transforms the way we receive them. When we understand that everything passes, we are no longer bound by the impossible desire to hold on forever, and in that acceptance, a new kind of peace begins to take root, quiet, yet enduring. In the end, as a Tibetan master once wrote, words Sophia came across later, "Impermanence is a reminder that the time we have with what we love is limited. So live in such a way that when it passes, there is no regret." 6.2. Letting go, not giving up, but freeing ourselves from clinging. On a quiet autumn morning in Kyoto, the maple leaves along the philosopher's path glowed in shades of crimson and gold. Tourists walked slowly, some taking photos, others simply enjoying the gentle breeze. Sitting on a wooden bench facing the canal, an elderly monk named Sojin quietly watched the leaves fall into the water and drift away. For Sojin, but when the relationship ended abruptly, she felt as if her entire future had been torn away. Elise tried everything, reading self-help books, distracting herself with travel, but deep inside, "How do I stop hurting when I still love him?" Sojin gently pointed to the maple leaf in his hand, half red, half brown. This leaf was once green, full of life, holding tight to the branch. But now it has changed color and will soon return to the earth. The branch does not weep for it, and the leaf does not resent the branch. It is an act of profound freedom, a conscious release from the mental chains of attachment. Attachment makes us confuse impermanence with loss, and when we cling, we suffer twice. Once from the natural change itself, and once from our resistance to it. Modern psychology also echoes this truth. Studies on emotional resilience show that those who practice acceptance and cognitive flexibility recover faster from trauma than those who keep replaying past events. The mind, when trained to release unhealthy attachments, gains more energy to embrace new possibilities. Elise began practicing this in small ways. She deleted photos not out of spite, but to create space for new memories. She stopped checking her ex-partner's social media, choosing instead to send silent wishes for his peace. She started new hobbies, tea ceremony, calligraphy, activities that anchored her in the present moment. Months later, while walking again along the philosopher's path, she realized something profound. She no longer carried the heavy weight of what was. The memories were still there, but they had transformed from sharp edges into smooth pebbles, kept in her heart without hurting her. In Buddhism, letting go does not mean we stop caring. We can still love, still remember, and still honor the past, but without being trapped by it. When we release our grip, our hands are open to receive the present moment fully. As Sojin often told his students, a river cannot flow if it tries to hold on to every drop of water that passes. Life is the same. Let it move. Let it change. Let it go. And so, the maple leaves keep falling each autumn. The canal keeps flowing toward the sea, and those who learn to let go find that they are not losing. They are finally free. 6.3. When the world trembles, and the art of keeping the mind as still as a lake. One winter morning in the Swiss Alps, thick snow blanketed the rooftops of small wooden houses along the slope. Inside a glass-walled room overlooking the valley, Lucas, a Swiss entrepreneur who had just endured a major upheaval in his career, sat cross-legged on a wool rug, eyes closed. Only weeks earlier, the company he had built over 15 years collapsed under the weight of a global economic crisis. The shock was followed by a chain of consequences: financial loss, family pressure, and a gnawing sense of failure that lingered in every moment. Lucas had always been the kind of person who kept everything under control, from detailed business plans to a personal schedule timed to the minute. But when the crisis struck, his guide was Anna, a German meditation teacher who had spent many years in India. At their first meeting, Anna led him into a simple room with only a meditation cushion and soft light. She said, "We will not try to chase away the storm, Lucas. We will learn how to stand still within it." The sentence puzzled him at first, but just a few weeks later, he began to understand. Anna taught Lucas mindfulness meditation combined with breath observation. Every morning, he would sit quietly for 20 minutes, focusing entirely on the air moving in and out at the tip of his nose. When his mind drifted to painful memories or worries about the future, he gently brought it back to the breath. No judgment, no force, just observation. At first, it was incredibly difficult, free from the grip of fear of failure. Looking back, he knew that without meditation, he might have sunk into a breakdown. Now, every morning, as he sits on his wool rug with eyes closed, and find peace amidst the ever-flowing currents of change. Through these lived experiences, we see that true tranquility does not come from control, but from the attitude of embracing life and practicing mindfulness in each passing moment. 7.1. Embracing reality, the first step toward true freedom. On a crisp spring morning in Vancouver, Canada, Elena Thompson walked along the edge of the Burrard Inlet, the water shimmering under the soft sunlight. Only months before, she had been living a meticulously planned life, her career thriving in a high-rise office, her social calendar full, her sense of security strong. Yet, in a matter of weeks, a sudden corporate downsizing left her jobless, her savings dwindling, and her confidence fractured. She was thrust into a reality she had never prepared for, one that demanded she confront uncertainty and impermanence directly. Elena had always believed that control was the key to happiness. Her daily routines, her carefully arranged finances. Resistance is pain. Acceptance is the doorway to freedom. The first weeks were challenging. Every time Elena tried to settle her mind, thoughts of fear, regret, and anger surged like waves crashing against a rocky shore. She struggled with the idea that acceptance did not mean giving up or surrendering ambition. It meant acknowledging reality without judgment. She began to see that clinging to what should be caused more suffering than the reality itself. Gradually, Elena discovered small moments of liberation. When her anxiety rose, she would pause and focus on the simple rhythm of her breath. When sadness struck, she allowed herself to feel it fully, observing it rather than suppressing it. By seeing life as an ever-changing flow rather than a rigid sequence of events, She realized that freedom was not found in controlling the external world, but in cultivating an inner equilibrium. Aiden shared a story from his years traveling across Asia. In a small Japanese village, a farmer faced a devastating flood that washed away his crops. While neighbors despaired and cursed fate, the farmer calmly rebuilt his terraces, observing the lessons in impermanence and adaptability. He accepted what was, and in that acceptance, he found peace, Aiden told Elena. Reality will always challenge you. Freedom comes not from avoiding it, but from embracing it fully. Elena began to implement this understanding into daily life. She started exploring new professional paths she had previously dismissed, volunteering in community projects, and reconnecting with friends with less expectation and more presence. Each choice became guided not by fear, but by clarity that arose from acceptance. Slowly, she noticed that even when life remained uncertain, her mind felt lighter, more spacious. The sense of being trapped by circumstances dissipated, replaced by a calm resilience. Over months, the simple act of accepting reality transformed Elena's perspective. Loss no longer carried the sting it once did. Setbacks became opportunities for reflection, and change became a teacher rather than an adversary. She realized that acceptance had not made life easier. It had made her stronger, more compassionate, and more alive. In the gentle sway of the water and the unceasing flow of the tide, she recognized a profound truth. Peace does not come from the world conforming to our wishes, but from the courage to meet it as it is, moment by moment, with an open heart. As a Zen master once said, "To resist is to suffer, to accept is to be free." Elena finally understood that the first step toward true freedom was not to control what life presented, but to open herself fully to it, allowing reality to teach her, guide her, and ultimately liberate her. 7.2. Cultivating compassion and gratitude. In the city of Vancouver, Canada, where streets are often shrouded in morning fog and rare sunlight filters through the trees, Marcus Levine, a French cardiologist living there, experienced a life-changing event. One winter evening, returning home after a long shift, Marcus received the devastating news that a patient he had saved several years ago had passed away from a rare disease. Although he understood that death is an inevitable part of life, the news still made his heart ache. He realized that despite his best efforts, humans cannot control everything. And this very helplessness can make one feel alone and fearful in the ever-flowing currents of life. Marcus decided to step away temporarily from the hospital's hectic pace and sought refuge in a small monastery nestled in the pine forests on the city outskirts. There, he met Venerable Aiden, inviting Marcus to participate in meditation practices focused on compassion and gratitude, practices that transform pain and unease into understanding and tolerance. During his days at the monastery, Marcus began keeping a journal of things he was grateful for: a patient's smile, a colleague's help, the morning bird song. At first, it seemed trivial, but gradually, each journal entry flowed like a gentle stream through his soul, soothing long-held anxieties. Venerable Aiden explained that in Buddhism, compassion is not only caring for others, but also empathizing with oneself and accepting life's limitations. Gratitude, combined with compassion, creates an inner stability that is not easily shaken by life's uncertainties. Marcus began applying these lessons in his daily life. When caring for suffering patients, Ethan Walker, an American entrepreneur seeking balance after years of relentless work and achievement, walks slowly. He has recently experienced a major upheaval. The startup he had poured his heart into collapsed within months, alongside the breakdown of close personal relationships. Everything seemed to crumble too quickly, leaving him with a sense of emptiness and disorientation, as if both the outside world and his inner world were unstable. During his days wandering the valley, Ethan meets Sophia, a vintner who has lived there all her life, embracing the natural rhythms and treasuring every seasonal change. Sophia invites Ethan to participate in her daily tasks: harvesting grapes, tending to the vines, observing the transformations of nature, from the gentle breeze to the sunlight filtering through the leaves. Each small activity becomes a lesson in mindfulness, presence, and appreciating the value of each moment. Every morning, Ethan learns to observe the leaves trembling in the wind, the remaining dew on the branches, and to take deep breaths. Feeling the fresh air fill his body. Initially, he is still restless, his mind clinging to failures and regrets, but gradually, as time passes, concentrating on his breath and sensing the life flowing through each moment. As the golden sunset bathes the valley, he experiences a calmness he had never known before, a state where anxiety and pressure dissolve, leaving only simple, complete presence. Ethan begins keeping a daily journal, recording the light. By paying attention to each moment, a person is no longer swept away by anxiety and endless desires. Instead, they cultivate inner peace, resilience, and gratitude, creating a firm foundation to face life's uncertainties. Ethan's story conveys an important message. Cherishing each moment not only alleviates stress and suffering, but also opens the door to lasting happiness. Living slowly allows one to truly perceive life's impermanence, recognize the value of every second, and learn to release unnecessary attachments, nurturing a peaceful and free mind amid the ever-changing currents of life. The lessons from Napa Valley are not only Ethan's personal experience, but also reflect a profound Buddhist philosophy. Impermanence is an inevitable law, and only by accepting reality and fully living each moment can we truly free ourselves from suffering and find lasting peace. Ethan returns to the city with a lighter heart, knowing how to pause, breathe, observe, and cherish every change, from the smallest details to the largest upheavals. And within that slowness, he discovers a simple yet enduring happiness. Living slowly does not mean stopping. It means being aware of every breath, every movement, every light and shadow, every feeling and experience. It is the journey of realizing that peace is not in controlling everything, but in the ability to accept, appreciate, and flow with the ceaseless current of life. When we learn this, even the briefest or most ordinary moments become incredibly precious, and the mind gradually becomes serene, free, and at peace amid all changes. 7.4. Cultivating an unshakable mind amid life's turbulence. On the Amalfi Coast in Italy, where waves rhythmically crash against towering cliffs, Emma Laurent, a French writer, sat on a wooden bench, eyes closed, listening to the sounds of the sea. She had just gone through a storm in her personal and professional life. Her career stalled, close relationships fractured, and important plans seemed to collapse within just a few months. The sense of helplessness and panic left her feeling lost in the world, uncertain where to anchor herself. During her days wandering along the coast, Emma met Luca, an Italian meditation teacher living nearby, who had faced numerous life challenges but always maintained calmness and clarity. Luca invited her to join morning meditation sessions by the sea, where he guided her to focus on her breath, listen to the natural sounds, and observe all changes without judgment. Initially, Emma struggled to concentrate. Her mind was pulled by the past and anxious thoughts of the future. Yet, day by day, she gradually learned to observe her thoughts, emotions, and surroundings as a witness, without letting them disturb her inner peace. Luca explained that cultivating an unshakable mind does not mean becoming indifferent or disengaged from the world. It is the ability to maintain calmness and clarity in any circumstance, fully aware that everything is impermanent and beyond absolute control. As Emma practiced meditation each morning, she began to realize that although the sea waves never cease, the wind changes direction, and the weather constantly shifts, her mind could stand firm like a lighthouse amid the storm. One afternoon, it is not swept away, yet it still senses every change. Those words became a moment of awakening for Emma. Emma also realized that building an unshakable mind does not happen overnight. It is a patient, continuous process. It requires daily practice through meditation, self-observation, and letting go of unnecessary attachments. When she combined this awareness with compassion and gratitude, life felt lighter. External disturbances no longer unsettled her mind, and the simple joys of present moments became more profound. Through this journey, Emma learned another crucial lesson. An unshakable mind does not mean isolation or coldness. On the contrary, it allows a person to open their heart to the world freely and without fear, knowing that external events cannot disturb their inner peace if they maintain mindfulness. From fierce waves to gentle breezes, from major failures to simple joys, an unshakable mind is the ability to perceive, accept, and respond wisely, helping one live peacefully amid life's constant changes. Emma's story makes the lesson clear. When we cultivate an unshakable mind, we are no longer tossed by life but stand calmly amid the storm, observing every change while preserving inner freedom and tranquility. This is one of the most important goals in Buddhist thinking and a key to living peacefully in a constantly changing world. Part 8: The Art of Living with Impermanence. Life is always in flux, and impermanence is not just an abstract philosophical concept, but a reality everyone faces every day. The stories, experiences, and knowledge we have explored in the previous sections all point to one insight. Change is inevitable, and our attitude toward these fluctuations determines the quality of each present moment. This concluding part will help us synthesize key lessons, summarize the journey of understanding, and open the path to living fully and peacefully amidst life's constant changes. 8.1. Summarizing the journey of awareness. Let us begin with the image of Noah, a climate researcher living in Vancouver, Canada. For many years, he observed and studied environmental changes, witnessing melting glaciers, floods, and climate instability. At first, Noah felt powerless, angry, and anxious about the future. He saw humanity as fragile before the ever-changing currents of nature, and every event served as a reminder of life's vulnerability. However, one misty morning, while walking along the shoreline, he observed flocks of migrating birds flying over the silvery water and listened to the steady sound of waves hitting the shore. Noah realized that although everything changes constantly, nature still operates in its own rhythm, and humans can learn to harmonize with this flow. This awareness opened a deep insight. Impermanence is not only about loss or upheaval, but also an opportunity to appreciate the value of the present and live more fully. From Sophia in Kyoto, learning to watch leaves fall and realizing that love does not disappear but merely changes form, to Emma on the Amalfi Coast, cultivating an unshakable mind amid life's storms. Those who regularly practice mindfulness and observe experiences through the lens of impermanence experience lower stress and anxiety and are more able to find inner peace. This represents a harmonious integration of Buddhist wisdom and Western science, demonstrating that deep understanding of impermanence is not only a philosophy, but also a practical tool for surviving and thriving in today's world. Looking back over the entire journey, from personal crises, romantic losses, and bereavements to historical, societal shifts, and scientific discoveries about adaptation, a clear connection emerges. Impermanence is an opportunity to grow, reassess the value of what we have, and cultivate a flexible, resilient, and peaceful mind. This awareness also means living fully in each moment. This is the art of living with impermanence, not resisting life's flow but harmonizing with it, maintaining inner calm, and seeing beauty in every change. Ultimately, but the teacher, turn impermanence into strength. Life is inherently ever-changing, and impermanence is not an enemy we need to fight against. On the contrary, impermanence is a wise, patient, and tireless teacher, constantly reminding us of the transience of all things: joy, sorrow, success, failure, love, and loss. When we truly realize this, fear and attachment begin to dissolve, giving way to inner freedom and peace. In Paris, Camille Moreau, a renowned writer, went through a major life setback when a long-cherished project was abruptly canceled. There are mornings when we wake up and realize that everything around us has changed in ways both silent and profound. The person who once stood by our side is no longer there. Sometimes it creeps in slowly, so quietly that we don't notice until everything is already different. But whether fast or slow, it is inevitable. None of us can hold on to everything forever. And that is the very nature of life, the nature of impermanence. Impermanence is not just some distant philosophical concept. It weaves itself into every moment of our daily lives, as if by squeezing harder we could make them stay. But that very clinging pulls us deeper into fear and loss. The Buddha once said, all conditioned things are impermanent. You will see people from all over the world who have learned to walk through upheaval, face inevitable change, and find peace amid losses that once seemed unbearable. Some lost everything, but a silent teacher of life. If you are in the middle of an uncertain period, if you've just gone through an event that has turned your world upside down, or if you simply want to learn how to live more lightly through the changes of life, then perhaps what you're about to hear will touch something deep within you. Because impermanence spares no one, and how we learn to live with it will determine whether the rest of our life is lived in peace or in suffering. Impermanence and Lessons on Life's Changes. Part 1. Opening. When everything changes before our eyes. There are moments in life when just a single event can change everything. We often assume that life will flow according to our plans, that what feels familiar today will still be there tomorrow. But then, an unexpected turn can erase every plan, shatter what we thought was solid, and push us onto a path we never imagined. The stories you are about to hear in this section are about those moments, when life suddenly veers in a different direction without warning, forcing people to confront impermanence and find themselves again in the midst of upheaval. 1.1. A morning that would never be the same. That London morning was wrapped in a thin layer of fog, the kind of heavy mist you see in late autumn. Clutching a hot cup of coffee, her mind still adrift in thoughts about a new project she was completing for an important client. Everything felt as normal as ever, and nothing in Emma's mind suggested that her life was about to change completely. She descended into the underground, blending into the busy crowd on the Piccadilly line. The same familiar faces of early commuters, the faint sound of